Now, I want to tell you a story. Not a made-up tale, but the kind of story that could have happened to anybody, maybe even somebody you knew once. Back when the world moved a little slower and people still sat on front porches after supper, this one comes from the Old West, Wyoming territory, back in 1883, a time when a handshake still meant something. And a person's worth was too often measured by what they could do, not who they were inside. It is about a man named Elias Stone, who thought he had nothing left to give, and a young woman the world had already thrown away, like yesterday's newspaper. If you have ever felt invisible, truly invisible, like nobody sees the real you, then you will understand this story. And if you have ever loved someone you could not save, you will understand Elias. So pull up a chair, pour yourself some coffee. Let me tell you what happened. The auction yard smelled of horse sweat and tobacco spit. Elias Stone leaned against the split-rail fence, hat pulled low against the midday sun. Flies buzzed lazy circles over the livestock pens. Men in wool vests stood in clusters, talking prices and weather, their voices blending with the lowing of cattle and the stamp of hooves on packed dirt. He had come for a draft horse. Nothing more. The bay mare in the second pen had good legs and a calm eye. He would bid when they called her number, load her in the wagon, and be home before supper. The auctioneer's brass bell clanged. The crowd shuffled forward. "Lot 17?" the auctioneer called. His voice cracked like dry leather. "Step up! Step up!" Elias glanced toward the block. A young woman stood there. Thin, pale, hair the color of dead wheat, pulled back tight. Her dress was gray, patched at the elbows, clean but worn past any dignity. She kept her hands folded in front of her, still as a fence post. "Orphan girl," the auctioneer announced. He wiped sweat from his forehead with a stained handkerchief. "Deaf, simple-minded, they say. Good for kitchen work, laundry, general help. Previous owner returned her." Someone in the crowd snorted. "Damaged goods." Laughter rippled through the men. Rough, careless. Elias watched her face. She did not flinch at the words, did not lower her head, like the defeated ones usually did. She looked straight ahead through the crowd, past them, like they were not worth the effort of seeing. But when the laughter came, something changed. A twitch near her left eye, quick as a heartbeat, gone before most would notice. Elias noticed. She heard that laugh. He was certain of it. If this story has already stirred something in your heart, I would be honored to know where you are listening from today. Sometimes the simplest hello can lead to the finest friendships. Elias raised his hand. "Dollar?" The word came out flat. No hesitation. He did not know where it came from, only that it was already said. The auctioneer blinked, leaned forward on the block like he had misheard. "Mr. Stone, that you—" "It's me." "You sure about this?" "She don't hear none. Don't talk none. Previous family said she's—" "I heard what you said." Elias stepped forward. The crowd parted. He could feel their eyes on his back, hear the whispers starting up like flies on a carcass. "She's got legs, don't she? She can walk to my wagon." The auctioneer opened his mouth, closed it, shrugged. "Sold, $1 to Mr. Stone." Elias walked to the table, pulled a crumpled bill from his vest pocket, laid it down without counting. The clerk scratched something in the ledger. Elias did not look at what. He turned and walked toward his buckboard. Did not look at the crowd. Did not need to. Their silence said enough. Behind him, the auctioneer called the next lot. A pair of mules. The world moved on. Same as always. Elias reached his wagon. The bay horses stamped in the heat, tails flicking at flies. He climbed onto the seat, picked up the reins, waited. He did not turn around, did not gesture, did not call out, just sat there. Leather loose in his hands, eyes on the road ahead. 10 seconds passed. 20. The wagon shifted. She climbed up on the other side, settled onto the bench without a sound. Hands folded in her lap, back straight as a fence post. She did not look at him. Elias clicked his tongue. The horses leaned into their harnesses, and the buckboard rolled forward, wheels creaking against packed dirt. The road stretched out ahead 10 miles of dust and prairie grass. The mountains, a blue smudge on the horizon. Neither of them spoke. The wheels creaked. Wind pushed through the sage, carrying the smell of wild onion and sun-baked earth. He kept his hands loose on the reins. No hurry. No tension. She watched them. He could feel it, her gaze on his fingers, his wrists, the way he held the leather, studying, measuring, looking for what? He reckoned he already knew. Threat. The first sign of a fist. 5 miles out. He glanced sideways. She was not watching his hands anymore. She was watching his face. And in her eyes, just for a moment, he saw something that did not make a lick of sense. Recognition. Like she already knew him, already knew. The house sat at the end of a dirt road, white clapboard siding gone gray with age. A porch wrapped around the front. 2 rocking chairs. Empty flower boxes. The kind of place that used to hold more people than it did now. Elias pulled the wagon to a stop. The horses blew and stamped, eager for water. The front door opened before he could climb down. A woman stepped onto the porch. 63, maybe older. Gray hair pulled back so tight it stretched the skin at her temples. Apron dusted with flour. Eyes sharp as a hawk watching a rabbit hole. Lord have mercy. She wiped her hands on her apron, leaving white streaks. What did you bring home this time? Elias? She'll be staying. He climbed down, boots hitting packed dirt. Names? Well, we'll find out. The woman Martha. The girl would learn later looked past him to the wagon. Her eyes narrowed, took in the gray dress, the thin shoulders, the face that gave nothing away. The deaf girl from the auction. Word travels fast. Word always travels fast when Elias Stone does something peculiar. Martha came down the steps, joints creaking, stopped 3 feet from the wagon. Can she understand me? She can read and write. That's what they said. Martha grunted, turned and walked back inside. The smell of biscuits and bacon grease drifted through the open door. She came out a moment later with a slate board and a piece of chalk. She held them up to the girl. Wrote in blocky letters, name. The girl looked at the slate, at Martha, at Elias. Then she reached out, took the chalk. Her hand did not shake. She wrote in smooth, clear script, Pearl. Martha's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. She took the slate back, studied the handwriting like she was reading a letter from the president himself. She write that herself? Appears so. That's proper penmanship. Better than mine, I'd wager. Reckon she's got more in her head than folks gave her credit for. Martha made a sound in her throat. Humph. Ain't that always the way? She looked at Pearl, really looked, for the first time. Well, come on then. I'll show you where you're sleeping. Pearl climbed down from the wagon, followed Martha up the porch steps, through the front door, past a parlor that smelled of wood polish and old books. The house smelled of pine and biscuits and something else, lavender. Maybe. Dried, and hung somewhere she could not see. A cast-iron cook stove dominated the kitchen. Rag rugs covered the plank floors. Curtains faded by years of sun hung limp in the windows. Martha led her down a narrow hallway, stopped at a door near the end. This is yours. She pushed it open. Pearl stood in the doorway, did not move. A bed with a real mattress. A patchwork quilt in faded indigo and cream. Hand-stitched. The threads worn soft with age. A washstand with a ceramic pitcher, chipped at the lip. A coal oil lamp on a small table by the window. Not a servant's room. Not a closet or a corner of the barn. A room. Her room. Martha watched her face. Supper's in an hour. You can wash up if you want. Pumps out back. She left. Her footsteps faded down the hall. Pearl stepped inside. The floorboards creaked under her weight. She touched the quilt. Soft. Old. Smelled like lavender and cedar, like someone had tucked dried flowers between the folds. Someone had made this, stitched it by hand. Years ago. Someone had cared enough to keep it clean. She went to the door, examined the latch. No lock on the outside. She could lock it from within, but no one could lock her in. That night, she lay in the dark, listening. The house settled around her. Boards popping and groaning. Wind whistled through gaps in the window frame. Somewhere above, a mouse skittered across the attic floor. A coyote called in the distance. Lonely and far away. She got up, crossed to the door, tested the handle. The hallway stretched empty. No one stood guard. No one waited. She closed it, went back to bed. An hour later, she checked again. Same empty hallway, same silence. The third time, she stood with her hand on the latch for a long while. The wood was smooth and cool under her palm. No lock on the outside. She could leave whenever she wanted. From somewhere deep in the house, she heard it low, almost too soft to catch. A man's voice. Elias? Reading aloud? Scripture? Maybe? Or something else. She pressed her ear to the door. He was talking to someone who was not there. Pearl woke before the sun. Gray light pressed against the window. The rooster had not crowed yet. She dressed in the dark, fingers finding buttons by memory, and slipped out of her room without a sound. The kitchen was cold. She knelt by the cook stove, arranged kindling the way she had learned in the orphanage, small sticks first, then larger pieces, struck a match. The flame caught, and she fed it slowly, watching the fire grow. By the time Martha came downstairs, the stove was hot, the coffee was ready, and biscuits were rising in the Dutch oven. Martha stopped in the doorway, looked at the stove, at the coffee, at Pearl. Well, she pulled her shawl tighter. Ain't you an early bird? Pearl pointed to herself, then to the back door. A question. Henhouse is past the barn. Watch for the red one. She bites. Pearl nodded and went out. The morning air smelled of sage and dew. Grass bent under her feet, leaving dark trails. The henhouse door hung crooked on its hinges, and inside, straw nests lined the walls. Hens clucked and shifted, ruffling feathers in the dim light. She gathered eggs warm in her palms, brown and speckled, 11 total. The red hen watched from her perch but did not move. Back in the kitchen, she set the basket on the table. Martha pointed to things: the flour bin, the salt crock, the lard tin, the Dutch oven on its hook. Pearl memorized each one. Days passed this way. She scrubbed floors until her knuckles cracked, weeded the garden rose pole beans climbing their stakes, squash sprawling wide, tomatoes struggling in the heat, hauled water from the well, the rope rough against her palms, the bucket heavy on the way up, beat rugs until dust clouded the air and her arms burned. She did not stop, did not rest, did not sit down until the light failed and Martha ordered her to bed. Martha watched. On the 4th day, she found Elias by the corral, mending a bridle. The leather creaked as he worked a new buckle into place. She works like the devil's chasing her. Elias did not look up. Maybe he was. You gonna ask about her past? Nope. Good. Martha folded her arms. Some things don't need digging up. Elias glanced toward the house. Pearl stood at the pump, filling a bucket. Her sleeves were rolled past her elbows, arms thin but strong. She worked the handle with a steady rhythm: up, down, up, down. She always knows when you're coming, Martha said. What? Watch her. Every time you walk up to the house, she turns before you get there, like she hears your boots on the dirt. Elias frowned. Floor vibrations. That's all. Maybe. Martha did not sound convinced. Or maybe she ain't as deaf as they said. She walked back to the house before he could answer. That evening, Elias found a note on the kitchen table. He picked it up. The paper was rough, torn from the edge of an old newspaper. The handwriting was clean and precise. Hens fed. Eggs in the basket. Thank you for the salt pork. He read it twice. Not thank you for letting me stay. Not thank you for saving me. Just the salt pork. Practical. Specific. The penmanship was better than his own. Better than most school teachers he had known. Sunday came. Elias sat on the porch in his father's old rocking chair. The wood groaned under his weight, same as it had for 30 years. He held his Bible leather cover cracked, pages soft with age and turning. He had read from it every Sunday since Margaret died. Habit, mostly. Comfort, sometimes. He opened to Luke, the lost sheep, 100 minus 1, and the shepherd who went looking. He read aloud, voice low, steady. The chair creaked beneath him back and forth, back and forth. A meadowlark sang from the fence post. The morning air smelled of coffee and fresh-baked bread. Halfway through, he heard the kitchen door creak. He did not turn, kept reading. Pearl sat in the doorway. He could see her from the corner of his eye back against the frame, hands in her lap, face turned away toward the garden. But her head tilted, just slightly, toward his voice. He finished the passage, closed the book. The chair stilled. When he looked up, she was gone. The kitchen door stood open. Inside, his coffee cup sat on the table, fresh, still steaming. He had not heard her pour it. Elias picked up the cup, held it in both hands. The warmth seeped into his palms. and the smell of strong coffee rose up around him. She had been sitting with her back to him, 20 feet away. He had been reading barely above a whisper. Floor vibrations did not explain the coffee. He thought about Martha's words. Maybe she ain't as deaf as they said. He thought about the auction. The way she had flinched at laughter, not words. The coffee cooled in his hands. What else had she heard? A month passed. Supper became ritual. Elias sat at the head of the table. Pearl sat to his left. Slate board propped against the salt crock. Martha served beef stew with carrots and potatoes. Biscuits with butter. Coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in, and watched and said little. The coal oil lamp threw shadows across the walls. And outside the window, the prairie stretched dark and endless under a sky full of stars. He talked. She wrote. Small things at first. The weather. The cattle. The price of feed in town. Then, slowly, pieces of something larger. My father built this place, Elias said one evening. He pushed beans around his plate with his fork, not really eating. Came out from Pennsylvania in '49. Gold fever. Never found any. Found land instead. Pearl's chalk moved across the slate. She held it up. Good trade. That's what he said. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Margaret thought so too. She loved the view from the east pasture. Said she could see all the way to tomorrow from up there. Past tense, Pearl noticed. She did not write anything, just waited. Elias looked at his plate. The smile faded like morning fog burning off. Anyway, that was a long time ago. He did not say more. Pearl did not ask. The next night, she wrote first, Orphanage in Missouri, Sisters of Mercy, sent west on a train when I was 12. Elias read the slate, set down his fork. The stew grew cold in his bowl. Orphan train, she nodded. How many families? 3 and 4 years. They all send you back. I left the second one. Third one burned down. She paused, then added, Not my fault. Martha snorted from the stove, where she was dishing up apple cobbler. I'd wager it wasn't. Pearl's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Close enough. You ever want to go back? Elias asked. To Missouri. The chalk scratched against slate. Nothing there. Never was. Wyoming ain't much better. Wyoming has sky. Elias looked at her. She looked back, steady, unflinching. The lamp flickered between them, casting moving shadows across the worn tablecloth. Martha set down bowls of cobbler. The smell of cinnamon and baked apples filled the kitchen. Nobody spoke for a while. They just ate. The only sounds the scrape of spoons and the pop of wood settling in the stove. Evenings on the porch became habit too. Elias sat in the rocking chair that had been his father's, then his, now worn smooth by decades of use. Pearl sat on the top step, mending basket beside her. Bone needle flashing in the fading light. She worked through his socks like a woman trying to outrun something darning holes, reinforcing heels, making old things last a little longer. He talked to the horizon, the land, the cattle. The way the creek ran low this time of year, and how his grandfather used to say that meant a dry summer coming. She did not write, just listened, or seemed to, her head tilted toward his voice. And sometimes her hands paused mid-stitch, needle frozen in the air. He told himself she was reading his lips, watching the movement of his jaw. That was all. Martha found him by the water trough the next morning. He was filling buckets for the horses, shirt already damp with sweat though the sun had barely cleared the hills. She watches you like you're a book she's trying to read. Elias dumped a bucket into the trough. Water splashed, dark and cold, soaking his boots. She watches everything. Not like that. Martha folded her arms across her chest. You talk. She leans in. You go quiet. She goes still, like she's waiting for the next page to turn. She's deaf. Martha. So they say? You think they lied? Martha shrugged. Her eyes were sharp, knowing. I think there's deaf, and then there's choosing not to hear. Seen plenty of both in my time. She walked back to the house before he could answer. That evening, Pearl sat on the porch step with the mending. Elias settled into the rocking chair. The wood groaned beneath him, familiar as an old friend. The light turned gold, then amber, then soft purple. Evening primrose bloomed along the porch rail, pale yellow flowers opening as the sun dropped below the mountains. He rocked. The chair creaked. His mind drifted to the south pasture. The new calf, the one born last week, spindly legs and eyes too big for her head. She had not been eating right. Scouring, maybe. He ought to check on her before full dark. He muttered it without thinking, voice low, half to himself, barely above breath. Calf in the south pen's got the scours. Ought to check on her. Pearl set down the mending. She stood, brushed straw from her skirt, walked down the steps and across the yard toward the barn, her footsteps soft on the packed dirt. Elias stopped rocking. He had been looking at the horizon, speaking to the floorboards. His voice had been barely louder than the creak of the chair. She was 20 feet away, back turned, already halfway to the barn. The barn door creaked open. Lantern light flickered to life inside. He sat frozen in the chair, hands gripping the armrests. She could not have heard that. No one could have heard that. The wagon rattled into Copper Creek just past noon. Pearl sat straight on the bench, hands folded in her lap. She wore a calico dress Martha had lent her, faded blue with white flowers, clean and pressed, the hem let down to cover her ankles. Her hair was braided and pinned. She looked respectable, almost ordinary. Elias pulled the horses to a stop in front of the general store. The boardwalk was crowded. Saturday. Families in from the outlying ranches. Men loading supplies into wagons. Women clustered near the dry goods window, talking behind gloved hands. Heads turned. He climbed down, came around to her side. Did not offer his hand. She had made it clear she did not need help, but stood close enough that anyone watching would know she was with him. She climbed down, smoothed her skirt, followed him up the steps. The general store smelled of pickle brine and coffee beans and the dusty sweetness of barreled flour. Mr. Hendricks stood behind the counter, spectacles perched on his nose, pencil behind his ear. Mr. Stone? He nodded. His eyes moved to Pearl, stayed there a beat too long. Ma'am? Pearl pulled a folded paper from her pocket. Her supply list, written in that clean, precise hand. She set it on the counter. Hendricks read it. His eyebrows rose. She write this herself. She did. Well, he adjusted his spectacles. I'll get this together. Take a few minutes. Pearl nodded, turned to examine the bolts of fabric stacked along the wall. Calico. Gingham. A pretty green cotton that caught the light. Elias heard it before she could. A whisper. The kind of voice that could curdle milk sharp, carrying, meant to wound. That's the deaf girl from the auction, the one Elias Stone bought. He did not turn, did not need to. Mrs. Purcell, he would know that voice anywhere. Living out at his place, another woman added. Mrs. Greer, probably. They always traveled together, like crows on a fence. Alone with him, just Martha for chaperone. Shameful. A man his age, and her so young, you have to wonder what he's thinking. Pearl's hand rested on a bolt of green cotton, her fingers pressed into the fabric. Just a fraction. Just enough for Elias to notice. She heard them. He was certain of it now. He moved to stand beside her. Did not speak. Just let his presence say what words could not. They left the store with a crate of supplies. Flour, salt, coffee, a tin of lard. Pearl carried the smaller bag thread and needles, things Martha had requested. The boardwalk was bright with noon sun. Elias squinted against it. A shadow stepped into their path. Harlan Briggs, big man, thick through the shoulders, gut straining against his vest like sausage casing. His hat sat back on his head, revealing a forehead red with sun and drink. He smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. Nothing friendly about Harlan Briggs at all. Elias Stone. He planted his boots wide, blocking the way. Heard you bought yourself some company. Elias stopped. Pearl stopped beside him. Harlan, she do everything you need, cooking, cleaning, and finish that sentence. Elias's voice went flat, cold as creek water in January. And find out what comes of it. Briggs laughed. The sound bounced off the storefronts. People on the boardwalk turned to watch, pretending not to, but watching all the same. Easy now. Just making conversation. He looked at Pearl, let his eyes travel down, then up, slow, deliberate, like he was appraising livestock. What's the matter? Cat got her tongue? Or did you buy that too? Pearl did not move, did not shift, did not look around, did not show any of the confusion a deaf woman should show when someone spoke near her. She stood perfectly still, face blank as a whitewashed wall, eyes fixed on a point past Briggs's shoulder. Listening to every word, Elias stepped forward. Pearl's hand touched his arm. Light. Quick. Gone before anyone else could see. A signal. Clear as Sunday church bells. Don't. He stopped. Briggs noticed the touch. His grin widened, showing tobacco-stained teeth. Trained her good. I see. Bet she does whatever you walk away, Harlan. Just being neighborly. No. Elias's jaw tightened. A muscle jumped beneath the skin. You ain't... Briggs held his ground for a moment. Two. His eyes flicked between Elias and Pearl, calculating something behind that mean little smile. Then he shrugged, stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy. Enjoy your purchase, Stone. He walked away laughing. The ride home was quiet. The horses plodded along the dirt road. Dust rose and settled. The sun beat down, hot on their shoulders. Neither of them spoke. But something had changed. She had touched him. Her hand on his arm. Quick and certain. She had known exactly when to do it. Known exactly what he was about to do. And he had defended her. Stood between her and Briggs like it meant something. Like she was not just a woman he had bought at auction. like she mattered. Elias stared at the road ahead. His hands were tight on the reins. She had not looked confused when Briggs spoke, had not watched his lips or searched for meaning. She had stood still because she understood every word. He glanced at her. She was looking at him. Not the road, not the horses. Him. Her eyes held something he could not name. Gratitude. Maybe. Or fear. Or something else entirely. She turned away before he could decide. The question sat in his chest like a stone he could not swallow. What else was she hiding? The nightmare came at 2 a.m. Elias woke, gasping. Sheets twisted around his legs like ropes. Sweat soaked through his union suit. Cold against his skin. Margaret's face. The blood on the sheets. The doctor's hands red to the wrists. The silence after that terrible. Empty silence where a baby's cry should have been. Always the silence. He threw off the covers. Sat on the edge of the bed. His hands shook. He pressed them against his thighs until the trembling stopped. The house was too small. The walls pressed in. He could not breathe. He pulled on his boots. Did not bother with a shirt. Walked through the dark hallway, past Pearl's door, out the back. The screen door banged behind him. The night air hit his bare chest like cold water. He did not care. He crossed the yard to the barn, pushed open the door, stepped inside. The smell of hay and horse sweat wrapped around him. Familiar? Safe? His mare? Sadie? Lifted her head from the stall, soft eyes in the darkness. He had not bothered lighting a lantern. The moon through the slats was enough. He sank down in the hay outside her stall, back against the rough wood, knees drawn up like a child hiding from thunder. 3 years. Sadie. His voice came out raw, cracked. 3 years, and I still see her face. The mare watched him, did not move. He talked. The words spilled out before he could stop them. Everything he had held inside. Everything he had never told another living soul. She wanted a baby so bad, talked about it every night. Names, plans. The room we'd build off the kitchen. I told her we had time. I told her there was no rush. His voice broke. He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes until he saw stars. Then she got sick. Fever came on fast like a prairie fire. Doc said the baby was coming too early. Said there was nothing he could do but pray. The hay rustled under him. He smelled dust and manure, and the ghost of Margaret's lavender soap impossible. He knew. But there it was. I wasn't there. The words came out like something rotten finally cut free. She went into labor while I was in the south pasture, checking on a calf. A calf. Sadie. I was saving a calf while my wife was dying. He dropped his hands, stared at them in the dim light. Dirt under the nails, calluses on the palms. Hands that could break a horse, but could not hold his wife when she needed him most. By the time I got back, it was over. Both of them. Just gone. His throat closed. He forced the next words out anyway. I couldn't save them. Couldn't even hold her hand at the end. She died alone in that room, calling my name, and I was in a field with a sick cow. The shame of it. 3 years. And the shame still burned like a brand pressed to bare skin. What kind of man lets his wife die alone? The question hung in the air. Sadie did not answer. The barn did not answer. Nothing answered. I told her we'd have a family, told her this land would be ours, that I'd take care of her, that she'd never want for anything. His voice dropped to a whisper. I lied, Sadie. Every word was a lie. Pearl lay in her bed, hand pressed flat against the wall. The planks were thin, old pine, warped with age. She had noticed it the first night, the way sounds carried from the barn through the wood, person, horses shifting, the creak of the door. She should not be listening. She listened anyway. His voice came through the wall, low and broken. She caught fragments at first, then sentences, then everything. The wife, the baby, the empty room, the calf in the south pasture. Her throat tightened. Her eyes burned. Tears slid down her temples, soaking into the pillow. She pressed harder against the wall, as if she could reach through it, as if she could tell him that she understood, that she knew what it meant to carry something so heavy it bent your spine. But she could not move, could not speak, could not do anything but lie there in the dark and hear a man tear himself apart. What kind of man lets his wife die alone? A sound escaped her. Small, strangled. She clamped her hand over her mouth. She understood now. His kindness was not charity. It was not pity. It was not even goodness. Not really. It was a man trying to save someone, anyone, because he could not save the ones that mattered. She lay awake until dawn. When the first gray light crept through the window, she got up, dressed in silence, walked to the kitchen. She found a scrap of paper, a pencil stub worn down to nothing. She wrote 4 words. She placed the note on his plate, weighted it down with the salt crock. Then she went outside to feed the hens. Same as every morning. The note said, "You did not fail." Elias found it an hour later. He stood at the table, still in his boots, still wearing last night's dirt and hay. He stared at the words. Read them again. A third time. His hand trembled. He had spoken to no one last night. To no one but Sadie and the dark and the ghosts that lived in his chest. But someone had heard. Someone knew. 3 days passed, Kamunkin. Something had changed. Pearl moved differently now. She held his gaze when he spoke instead of looking away. Lingered at the edges of rooms instead of disappearing into work. Twice he caught her watching him from the kitchen window when he crossed the yard. She knew he knew. He knew she knew he knew. Neither of them spoke of it. On the 4th day, Elias decided to stop pretending. He stood at the corral fence, back to the house, watching the horses graze. The sun hung low, painting the grass gold. Wind pushed through the sage, carrying the smell of wild onion and coming rain. He spoke without turning. Storm coming from the west tonight. His voice was low, barely above breath. A test. Behind him, he heard the creak of the porch step, the rustle of fabric. Then footsteps crossing the yard, not toward him, but toward the clothesline where shirts hung drying in the breeze. She pulled the first shirt down, folded it, reached for the second. He had not finished the sentence when she started moving. That was enough. He turned, walked across the yard, stopped 3 feet from her. Pearl, she kept folding, did not look up. Her hands moved fast, mechanical. Pearl, look at me. Her hands stilled on the fabric. She stood there, shirt pressed against her chest, head bowed. Slowly, She raised her eyes. He had never seen her look at him like this. No mask, no blankness. Just her raw and open and waiting for whatever came next. "Can you hear me?" The question hung between them. The wind died. Even the horses went quiet. Her lips parted, closed. Her throat worked, swallowing something that would not go down. Then a sound. Some things. Her voice was rough, cracked, like a rusty hinge forced open after years of silence. "Not everything, but enough." Elias did not move, did not breathe. She was talking. The deaf girl from the auction was standing in his yard, holding his shirt, and she was talking. "How long?" "Always." She swallowed hard. The words seemed to cost her something. "I just stopped letting people know." "Why?" She set the shirt down on the basket. Her hands trembled. She pressed them flat against her skirt. "Because when folks think you can't hear, they stop expecting you to answer. And when you don't answer..." She looked away, looked back. "They leave you alone. The orphanage, the trains, the families that sent her back." He understood now, not deaf hiding, not simple surviving. "The barn?" His voice came out hoarse. "That night. You heard. I heard. No hesitation, no apology. Every word." The shame hit him like a fist to the chest. All those things he had said. The failures. The guilt. The raw, bleeding truth of it. She had heard it all. "Then you know what I am?" Pearl shook her head. A small movement. Certain. "I know what you lost." Her voice was steadier now, still rough, but gaining strength with each word. "That ain't the same thing. I let her die alone. You were trying to save something. You didn't know." "I should have been there." "Maybe." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the pulse jumping in her throat. "But you're here now. That's what matters." He stared at her. This woman he had bought at auction. This woman who had pretended to be deaf to survive a world that wanted her silent. This woman who had heard his darkest confession and answered with 4 words on a scrap of paper. "You did not fail." "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice cracked. "That you could hear, because no one ever wanted to hear me speak." Her eyes were bright now, wet. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she did not wipe it away. "They only wanted me quiet, wanted me to work and not complain and disappear when they were done with me. I ain't them. I know that now." Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "I knew it the day you bought me. You didn't look at me like I was broken. You looked at me like I mattered." His chest ached. Something old and frozen was cracking inside him. Something he had thought was dead and buried. "You let me talk to myself like a fool all this time." "You weren't talking to yourself." Her voice softened. "You were talking to her. I just happened to hear." "That bother you, listening to a man grieve his dead wife?" "No." She shook her head again. "It made me trust you." "Why?" "Because a man who grieves like that..." She paused, swallowed, forced the words out slow and careful, like she was learning to speak all over again. "He knows how to love, and he ain't gonna..." He ain't gonna hurt someone who's already been hurt enough. The wind picked up. Shirts billowed on the line behind her. The sun sank lower, turning the world amber and rose. Elias reached out. Slow. Careful. Gave her time to pull away. She did not pull away. His hand touched her cheek. Rough palm against wet skin. She leaned into it just a fraction, just enough. Pearl. Yeah? What do you want? Not what you're running from. What do you want? She closed her eyes. Her hand came up, covered his. When she opened her eyes again, something new was in them. Something that looked like the first green shoots after a long, hard winter. I want to stop pretending, he nodded. Once. Then don't. The screen door banged. Martha stood on the porch, dish towel frozen in her hands, mouth hanging open. Lord have mercy. Her voice carried across the yard. Did she just? Was she just? Pearl turned toward the house, toward Martha, toward everything she had hidden from for so long. And she spoke. Good evening, Martha. Martha dropped the dish towel. It landed in the dirt at her feet. She did not pick it up, just stood there on the porch, mouth working, no sound coming out. Pearl walked toward her, slow, steady, each step deliberate. I can explain it, Lord have mercy. Martha's voice came out strangled. Lord have mercy, child. You can talk. Yes, ma'am. This whole time, yes, ma'am. Martha sat down hard on the porch step, her hands pressed to her chest like she was checking her heart still beat. Pearl sat beside her, picked up the dish towel, folded it neat. Why? Martha's voice cracked. Why didn't you say nothing? Safer not to. Pearl looked at her hands. The calluses. The cracked knuckles. When people think you can't hear, they forget you're there. Forget to be careful. I learned young. Stay quiet. Stay invisible. Stay alive. Martha stared at her. The shock melted slow, like spring ice on the creek. Something soft took its place. Well, she reached over, took Pearl's hand in hers, squeezed hard. You ain't invisible no more. Pearl's breath caught. Martha stood up, brushed off her apron, and walked back into the house. Coffee's getting cold, she called over her shoulder. And I expect you got some talking to catch up on. Word spread. Mrs. Purcell told Mrs. Greer at church that Sunday. Mrs. Greer told the preacher's wife after the service. By the following week, half the county knew. Pretending, Mrs. Purcell announced at the general store, loud enough for the whole building to hear. This whole time, can you imagine the deception? Pearl stood at the counter, writing her order on paper. She could have spoken. She chose not to. Some habits died hard. Mr. Hendricks handed her the list. Anything else, Miss Pearl? She looked at him. He looked back. Steady. Kind. No, sir. Thank you. Mrs. Purcell's mouth fell open like a landed trout. Pearl walked out into the sunshine. Briggs found them outside the feed store 2 weeks later. Same swagger. Same ugly grin. Heard the deaf girl ain't so deaf after all. He planted himself in their path. You been listening this whole time, bet you heard some interesting. She can hear you now. Harlan. Elias's voice was flat as a planed board. Choose your words careful. Briggs opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Pearl. She looked back. did not blink, did not flinch. He had nothing to say after that. Early summer came soft and warm. Pearl found the wildflowers growing in the ditch by the road. Indian paintbrush, red as sunset, prairie clover, purple and sweet-smelling. She gathered them in her apron, carried them to the east pasture. The oak tree stood alone on the ridge, wide branches throwing shade across the grass. Beneath it, a small stone marked where Margaret lay. The letters were worn but still readable. Pearl knelt in the grass, dug small holes with her fingers, dirt packing under her nails, planted the flowers one by one, patted the earth down around them. She did not ask permission. That evening, Elias walked to the pasture with a bucket of water, set it down beside her. Did not say a word. She watered the flowers. He stood beside her. The sun went down behind the mountains, painting the sky orange and pink and gold. Neither of them needed to speak. The rocking chair had been in the barn for 3 years. Pearl found it under a canvas tarp, covered in dust. One runner cracked but solid. She dragged it to the porch herself, set it beside Elias's chair, sat down. When he came up from the corral that evening, he stopped at the bottom of the steps, looked at the chair, looked at her. "You sure about that? I ain't trying to replace her, Elias." "I know. I just thought—" Pearl ran her hand along the worn armrest. "She might like the company. Both of us sitting here. Better than you alone." He stood there a long moment. The light turned gold around him. Dust motes drifted in the air like tiny stars. Then he climbed the steps, sat down in his chair, started to rock. She rocked beside him. The meadowlark sang from the fence post. The wind pushed through the grass, carrying the smell of sage and warm earth, somewhere in the house. Martha clattered dishes and hummed an old hymn, Amazing Grace. Maybe, or something older, or something. Pearl. "Yeah. You gonna stay?" She did not answer right away. Let the question sit between them. Let the silence hold it, the way good silence does. "That depends." On what? On whether you're asking." He stopped rocking, reached across the space between their chairs. His hand found hers, rough palm against rough palm. The hands of two people who knew what it meant to work, to lose, to keep going anyway. "I'm asking." She did not answer with words. She squeezed back. The sun sank below the mountains. The light turned soft. The meadowlark called once more and fell silent. They sat together on the porch, hands clasped, watching the darkness come gentle over the land. There is a quiet that settles after a story like this. Not empty, just still. The kind of stillness that comes when something tender has been touched, and you are not quite ready to let it go. Perhaps you know what it feels like to carry something alone for a long time. To wear silence like a second skin because the world never asked to hear you. Many of us have stood in rooms full of people and felt invisible. Some of us have loved someone we could not save. And we have carried that weight in places no one else can see. It is all right if this story did not answer anything. Some things are not meant to be resolved. They are meant to be held. Gently. The way you would hold something fragile and familiar, the way Elias held that note in his hands. The way Pearl finally let herself be heard. You do not need to do anything with what you feel right now. It is enough to have felt it. It is enough to have stayed until the porch light faded and the meadowlark went quiet. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening all the way to the end.